I warned you, we were just having fun. I didn't want your swell belly. 5 years later, he saw her son and begged for a reunion. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family story channel. May the Almighty bless every woman in our family with unshakable strength, endless dignity, and a heart so pure it lights up the world. May your courage rise higher than every challenge, your love touch every soul, and your presence bring peace, joy, and hope to all around you. You are the pillars of life, the silent heroes whose power holds families together, and the treasure that gives this world meaning. If your heart is true, like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." The conference room erupted in polite applause, but one man stood up, clapping like he'd witnessed something transcendent, his enthusiasm cutting through the professional restraint of the other executives gathered in the downtown high-rise. Betty Davis collected her presentation materials with practiced efficiency, pretending she didn't notice the tall man in the charcoal suit, making his way toward her through the crowd of investors and business leaders. She'd seen men like him before, polished, confident, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, probably used to getting whatever they wanted with a smile and a business card. They always assumed their interest was flattering, never considering it might be unwanted. That was brilliant. Mark Perry extended his hand, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her pulse skip despite her better judgment. The market analysis on consumer behavior patterns. Revolutionary. I've never seen anyone break down demographic shifts with that level of precision. You just changed how I think about our entire retail strategy. Betty shook his hand briefly, professionally, her grip firm enough to establish boundaries without being unnecessarily cold. Thank you. If you'll excuse me, I have another meeting across town. Mark Perry, Senior VP at Perry Enterprises. He stepped into her path, not aggressive but deliberate, his body language suggesting he wasn't accustomed to being dismissed by anyone, much less someone he'd decided to pursue. I'd love to discuss potential collaboration between our companies. Your insights into urban consumer trends could transform our retail division. I'm thinking partnership, not just consultation. I don't mix business with whatever this is. Betty sidestepped him smoothly, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she headed for the exit, her presentation folder tucked under her arm like armor, like a shield against men who thought persistence was charming. He didn't follow. Smart man. Or perhaps just strategic, already planning his next approach, already calculating how to get past her defenses. The flowers arrived at her office the next morning before she'd even finished her first cup of coffee, before she'd had time to process the previous day's successful presentation. 24 white roses arranged in an expensive crystal vase, their perfume filling her entire workspace and drawing appreciative comments from her assistant. The card was simple, direct. For the most captivating presentation I've ever witnessed. Dinner to discuss business. Mark Perry. Betty handed them to her assistant without breaking stride toward her desk, without even pausing to appreciate their beauty. Return these to sender. But Ms. Davis, they're beautiful, her assistant protested, clearly confused about why anyone would reject such an expensive gesture. Return them. Betty's tone left no room for negotiation, no space for argument. She'd built her career by maintaining clear boundaries, by refusing to let anyone, especially men who thought money could buy access, blur the professional lines she'd drawn. And she wasn't about to start compromising those boundaries now for a man who thought expensive flowers could buy her time. The roses appeared again the next day. Same arrangement, same crystal vase, different card. I understand boundaries, but I also understand potential. Coffee instead of dinner? No business required. MP. Return them, Betty told her assistant, who was beginning to look genuinely concerned about the growing pile of rejected bouquets accumulating in the office mailroom. Day 3 brought sunflowers, her favorite, though she'd never told him that, had never mentioned it anywhere public. The card read, "Persistence or insanity, you decide. Either way, I'm committed. Mark." Betty stared at those sunflowers for a full minute, trying to figure out how he'd discovered her flower preference, whether he'd researched her somehow or just gotten incredibly lucky. She refused to be charmed by the attention to detail, refused to let herself wonder if maybe this one was different. Finally, she instructed her assistant to donate them to the hospital across the street. On day 4, the flowers came with a handwritten letter, 3 pages of carefully chosen words. Betty made the mistake of opening it during her lunch break, reading Mark's surprisingly eloquent explanation of why he thought they could build something meaningful together, both professionally and personally. His vulnerability caught her off guard, the admission that he was terrified of women who see through nonsense, and that she was exactly that kind of terrifying, exactly what I need, even if it scares me. She threw the letter away, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it in her office trash can. But she remembered every word, could recite entire sentences hours later when she was alone. Day 5, Mark showed up at her gym. Betty spotted him immediately on the treadmill across from hers, clearly out of place in brand new workout clothes that still had creases from the package, looking like someone who'd never set foot in a gym in his life. He was struggling to maintain pace, his running form awkward, his breathing labored, sweat already pouring down his face. He'd obviously never been to this gym before in his life, had probably never worked out anywhere that didn't have a private trainer and eucalyptus towels. She finished her run at her usual pace, grabbed her water bottle and towel, and walked past him without a glance, even though she could feel his eyes following her movement across the equipment floor. "Betty, wait!" She kept walking toward the locker room, her spine straight, her resolve intact, refusing to give him even the satisfaction of acknowledgement. The lunch invitation came via email on day 6, professionally worded, suggesting a specific restaurant known for business meetings. He'd included a detailed agenda of discussion topics, making it abundantly clear this would be purely professional, no romantic overtones. Betty appreciated the effort even as she deleted it without responding, even as she refused to be impressed by his adaptability. The coffee meeting request followed on day 7, also deleted without a second thought. On a rainy Thursday evening 3 weeks after the conference, Betty exited her office building and found Mark Perry standing by the entrance in the pouring rain. He was soaked to the bone, his expensive suit clinging to his frame like wet paper, hair plastered to his forehead, rivulets of water running down his face. His lips had a faint blue tinge from the cold, and he was shivering despite clearly trying to appear composed. "How long have you been standing here?" The question escaped before she could stop it, concern overriding her carefully maintained distance, her professional detachment cracking just slightly. 3 hours. His teeth were chattering slightly, his body shivering despite his attempt to stand still and appear unaffected. Maybe 4. I lost track around the time I lost feeling in my feet and started questioning my life choices. "You're wasting your time." Betty opened her umbrella, but something in her voice had softened, just barely. A crack in the armor she'd spent weeks maintaining, a hint of genuine concern breaking through. "Maybe." He pushed wet hair back from his face with a trembling hand, water streaming down his arms. "But you're worth wasting time for. You're worth standing in a storm. You're worth looking like an idiot in designer clothes that will never recover from this, that my dry cleaner will probably charge me triple to even attempt to save." Betty walked past him toward her car, her heels splashing through puddles forming on the sidewalk. She made it 10 steps before stopping, her conscience warring with her self-preservation instinct, her practical nature fighting against something softer. Without turning around, she said, "You have terrible taste in weather for grand gestures." She heard his laugh, surprised and genuine, slightly breathless from the cold. "I have terrible taste in a lot of things, apparently, including knowing when a woman is completely out of my league and I should quit while I'm behind, before I catch pneumonia for nothing." That made her turn, curiosity getting the better of her judgment. "Is that supposed to be flattery?" "It's supposed to be the truth." Mark stepped closer, rain streaming down his face, his eyes never leaving hers, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I've sent flowers, which you returned. showed up uninvited at your gym, which was creepy, and I apologize for crossing that line. Made a fool of myself repeatedly in ways I'm sure your assistant finds entertaining. I'm clearly not good at this whole pursuit thing. I'm clearly terrible at reading signals, since every signal you've sent says leave me alone. At what, specifically? Betty adjusted her umbrella, rain spattering her shoulders, soaking through her blazer. At convincing someone like you to give someone like me a chance. He spread his hands helplessly, water dripping from his fingers onto the wet pavement. One dinner. If you hate every second, if I bore you or offend you or disappoint you in any way, I'll disappear forever. You'll never see another rose, another email, another pathetic man in the rain outside your building. I swear it on everything I value. Betty studied him carefully. This man who'd pursued her with the determination of someone trying to close a business deal, except his hands were shaking and his eyes held something that looked dangerously close to genuine vulnerability, something raw and unguarded. She'd seen enough false vulnerability from men to recognize the real thing, and this, against all her instincts, against all her experience, felt real. Men like you don't usually chase women like me 5 times, she said quietly, testing him, waiting to see how he'd respond. Women like you don't usually look at men like me twice, he countered without hesitation, without the defensiveness she'd expected. I know what I look like to you. Corporate air, probably spoiled, probably used to getting what I want without working for it, and you're not wrong about most of that. But I've never worked this hard for anything in my life, have never wanted anything this much. That has to count for something. The rain fell between them, the city noise fading into background static, leaving just the two of them standing on a wet sidewalk, having a conversation that felt more honest than anything Betty had experienced in months. She felt the familiar warning bells, the instinct that had protected her through every failed relationship, every man who'd wanted her until the novelty wore off, until her success became threatening, until her independence became inconvenient rather than attractive. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked like he was just as terrified as she was, something that suggested he understood exactly how much power she held in this moment, how completely she could destroy him with one more rejection. One dinner, she heard herself say, immediately questioning the decision even as the words left her mouth. Saturday, 7 o'clock. You pick the place, but if you choose somewhere pretentious where I'll be the only black woman in the room and everyone will stare, I'm walking out before we order. The smile that broke across his face could have lit the entire city block, genuine joy transforming his features from businessman to something younger, more vulnerable. No pretentious, I promise. Somewhere real. Somewhere we can actually talk, without worrying about who's watching or judging. And Mark? Betty adjusted her umbrella, meeting his gaze directly, making sure he understood the stakes. Don't make me regret this. I have a very low tolerance for wasted time and disappointed expectations. I've been disappointed enough. I won't. His voice carried absolute conviction, the kind of certainty that came from someone making a promise they fully intended to keep. I swear I won't. Betty walked to her car, feeling his eyes on her back, aware of him still standing there in the rain watching her leave. She didn't look in the rearview mirror as she pulled away from the curb, didn't want to see if he was still standing there like some kind of romantic movie cliché, like someone who hadn't learned that grand gestures usually meant nothing. But when she got home and checked her phone after changing into dry clothes and making herself tea, there was one text message waiting. Thank you for saying yes. I know I don't deserve it. I know I haven't earned it yet. She stared at those words for a long moment before typing back, You're right, you don't. Don't mess this up. His response came immediately. I won't. I promise. I'll make Saturday worth the risk you're taking. Betty set her phone down and walked to her bedroom window, looking out at the rain-soaked city lights blurring through the water streaming down the glass. She'd built walls for good reasons, Men had proven time and again that they couldn't be trusted with the real her, the part she kept locked away behind professional competence and carefully maintained distance, behind the success and independence that intimidated more men than it attracted. But Mark Perry had stood in the rain for 3 hours just for the chance to ask her to dinner. That had to mean something. Or maybe it meant nothing. Maybe he was just more persistent than most, more willing to endure discomfort for the chase, for the conquest of someone who kept saying no. She'd find out Saturday, one dinner. If he showed even a hint of being like all the others, treating her as a trophy, a conquest, something exotic to possess and show off, she'd walk away and never look back. She'd survived worse than one disappointing dinner. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark. Just so you know, I'm already researching pretentious restaurants that serve amazing food. This is harder than it sounds. Most places I know are terrible. My entire life has been very pretentious, and I'm realizing I don't actually know what normal people do. Despite herself, despite every instinct screaming caution, Betty smiled at the self-awareness in that message, at the vulnerability of admitting his own limitations. Then she caught her reflection in the window, saw that smile, and forced it away. She couldn't afford to be charmed, not yet. Not until she knew if this man was different or just better at playing the game than the others who'd tried and failed to get past her defenses. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the streets clean, and Betty stood at her window thinking about white roses and sunflowers and a man foolish enough to stand in a storm just for the chance to buy her dinner. "Don't mess this up," she whispered to the empty room, not sure if she was talking to Mark or herself, or both of them equally. Saturday would tell her everything she needed to know. She hoped she was ready for the answer. Chapter 2. The Fall. The restaurant was a small Italian place tucked into a side street in a neighborhood Betty didn't expect Mark Perry to know existed. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles and absolutely zero pretension anywhere in sight. "Not pretentious?" Betty raised an eyebrow as Mark held the door open, the warm smell of garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread washing over them from inside. "The owner's been running this place for 40 years, Mark said, his hand hovering near the small of her back without actually touching her, respecting her space even in this small gesture. No Michelin stars, no dress code, no valet parking or celebrity clientele. Just the best pasta in the city, and a guy named Vincent who'll tell you his entire life story if you let him, including his very strong opinions on modern dating and young people who don't appreciate good food." As if summoned by the mention of his name, an elderly man in a flour-dusted apron emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face lighting up with genuine joy when he saw Mark. "Mark, you brought a date. Finally, a woman with good taste shows up in my restaurant. I was beginning to think you only dated your laptop and quarterly reports." Betty laughed, her first genuine laugh of the evening, as Vincent kissed her hand with theatrical flair before disappearing back into the kitchen, muttering in rapid Italian about young people and romance, and finally, something interesting happening in his restaurant. "You've been here before," Betty observed, settling into her chair and noting the easy familiarity between Mark and the owner, the kind of relationship that developed over time and repeated visits. "Every Sunday for 2 years." Mark poured water into her glass with careful attention, his movements practiced. "After my mother passed, I couldn't handle the big family dinners anymore. Too many people asking if I was okay, too much forced normalcy, too many expectations to be fine when I wasn't fine. Vincent adopted me without asking. Now I eat pasta and listen to stories about his hometown in Sicily and his 50-year marriage to a woman who, according to him, still makes him crazy in the best possible way." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard, the rawness of grief still evident even years later, even after time should have softened the edges. "I'm sorry about your mother. She would have liked you." Mark's smile was sad and genuine, his eyes distant for a moment, clearly seeing someone who was no longer there. "She always said I needed someone who wouldn't put up with my nonsense. Someone who'd call me on my privilege and make me work for things instead of expecting them to be handed over because of my last name. I don't even know what your nonsense is yet. Give it time. I'm sure it'll reveal itself in all its disappointing glory. I'm apparently very good at disappointing people, according to my family. Dinner became 4 hours that felt like 4 minutes. Vincent brought course after course, each one better than the last, appearing tableside with perfect timing to deliver food and then disappear before he could interrupt their conversation, like he instinctively knew when to give them space. Mark and Betty talked about everything except business. He told her about growing up in his father's shadow, the crushing pressure to be perfect, to represent the family name in every interaction, the fear that he'd never be enough no matter what he accomplished or how hard he tried. She told him about building her career from nothing, about being underestimated in every room she walked into, about proving wrong every person who'd ever doubted her while maintaining her dignity and refusing to become bitter or hard. "You scare me," Mark admitted somewhere around midnight, when they were the only customers left and Vincent was pretending not to eavesdrop from the kitchen while very obviously eavesdropping and smiling to himself. "Good," Betty said, meeting his gaze directly without flinching. "I should scare you. I scare most men once they realize I'm not going to change or shrink myself to make them comfortable. Not in a bad way." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, made her heart beat faster despite her attempts to stay guarded. "You're everything I'm not. Fearless, self-made. You don't need anyone to validate you or save you or complete you. You're already complete. You don't need me or any man. That's terrifying and incredible at the same time." "That's not a compliment. That's just survival." Betty took a sip of wine, her throat suddenly tight with emotion she hadn't expected to feel. "When you're a black woman in business, you learn to be complete or you don't survive. It's both." Mark reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers, asking permission without words, respecting boundaries even in this moment of connection. "Can I be honest about something that might make me sound pathetic? Haven't you been honest all evening? I'm terrified right now." His voice dropped low enough that she had to lean in to hear him, creating an intimacy that felt deliberate and dangerous and surprisingly welcome. "Women like you don't usually look at men like me twice. I know I said that in the rain, but I meant it more than you probably realize. You could have anyone. You're brilliant and beautiful, and you see right through people's garbage, through all the posturing and pretending. I don't know why you said yes to dinner, but I'm grateful you did, because this has been the best night I've had in years, maybe ever." Betty looked at his hand, still hovering near hers, not presuming to touch without permission, still waiting for her signal. At his eyes, which held none of the arrogance she'd expected from a man in his position, from someone born into wealth and privilege. At the vulnerability he was offering her like a gift, trusting her not to weaponize it against him, not to use it to hurt him later. "You want to know why I said yes?" she asked quietly. "More than anything. Because you stood in the rain for 3 hours looking like a drowned corporate disaster. Because you sent flowers 5 times, even though I kept returning them, even though most men would have given up after the second rejection. Because you looked absolutely ridiculous at my gym in your brand new workout clothes that still had tags attached." She finally closed the distance, her fingers brushing against his, testing the connection, seeing how it felt. "Because you're either the most persistent man I've ever met, or completely insane, maybe both." "Can't I be both?" She smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and transformed her face. "I'm starting to think you definitely are both, persistent and insane. It's actually kind of charming in a ridiculous way." Vincent emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of limoncello, setting them down with a knowing look, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "On the house. For young love. I know love when I see it. I've been watching it walk through my door for 40 years. You two have it. Don't fight it." "We just met," Betty protested. heat rising to her cheeks at the presumption. "Doesn't matter." Vincent waved his hand dismissively, flour still dusting his sleeve. "Time is irrelevant when it comes to the heart. The heart knows immediately. The head takes longer to catch up, to accept what the heart already knows. You'll see. Come back in 6 months and tell old Vincent he was right." Mark walked her to her car under a sky full of stars, the city having quieted to its late-night hush, the streets nearly empty except for a few people heading home. The streets were nearly empty, and Betty felt something shifting inside her chest, walls crumbling that she'd spent years building brick by careful brick, protection she'd thought was permanent. "Can I see you again?" Mark asked, his hand still holding hers from the restaurant, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm in a gesture that felt both intimate and innocent. "You're very sure of yourself for someone who just admitted to being terrified." "I'm not sure of anything except that I've never met anyone like you, and I don't want tonight to be the only time I get to hear you laugh or watch you tear apart bad arguments or see you smile like you just did in there when Vincent embarrassed you." Betty should have said something cautious, should have protected herself, should have remembered every time she'd let her guard down and gotten hurt, every man who'd promised one thing and delivered another, every relationship that had ended with her feeling foolish for trusting. Instead, she kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious or moving too fast or revealing too much too soon. Then his hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness, and she pressed closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like losing control and finding something at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mark rested his forehead against hers, his eyes still closed, his breath warm on her face. "I need you to know something," Betty whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet street, barely louder than the distant traffic. "I don't play games. I don't do casual. I don't waste time on relationships that aren't going somewhere real. If this is just fun for you, if I'm just an interesting challenge or a way to rebel against your family, walk away now, please, before I start believing this is real." "I'm not going anywhere." His voice was absolutely certain, his eyes opening to meet hers with complete sincerity, with a directness that made her want to believe him, despite every warning bell. "I promise you, Betty, I'm not going anywhere. This is real. You're real. This is the most real thing I've felt in my entire life." She believed him. That was her first mistake. The next 3 months were the kind of romance that felt like a fever dream, intense and consuming, and slightly unreal, like something from a movie. Stolen afternoons in Mark's penthouse apartment where they'd talk for hours and lose track of time completely. Midnight drives along the coast with the windows down and music playing and the ocean spreading out beside them. Conversations that lasted until sunrise, covering everything from childhood dreams to current fears to future possibilities they were both afraid to name out loud. He introduced her to his world carefully, aware of how different their lives were, conscious of the scrutiny she'd face from his social circle, but Betty navigated it all with the same confidence she brought to everything else, refusing to be intimidated by old money or social expectations or people who looked at her like she didn't belong. They kept it private at her insistence. She didn't want the scrutiny, the society pages, the questions about the successful black entrepreneur dating the Perrier, the whispers about what she was after, whether she was good enough, if it was real or strategic. Mark agreed immediately, seeming relieved to keep this thing between them precious and protected from outside judgment. "I like having you to myself," he'd said one night, pulling her close on his balcony overlooking the city lights stretching to the horizon. "The rest of the world can wait. They'll ruin it if we let them in too soon. They always ruin everything good." He was different than anyone she'd dated before. Attentive, without being suffocating, asking about her work with genuine interest and intelligent follow-up questions. Passionate without being possessive, giving her space when she needed it without making her feel guilty. He listened when she talked about her goals, asked intelligent questions, celebrated her victories like they were his own. But there were moments, brief, fleeting, when she'd catch him staring at nothing, his mind somewhere else, and a shadow would cross his face like storm clouds blocking the sun, like he was thinking about something heavy and dark. "What are you thinking about?" she'd ask, touching his arm to bring him back to the present. Nothing important. He'd pull her into a kiss, distraction through affection, and she'd let it go because everything else was so good, so perfect. She should have pushed harder, should have demanded to know what thoughts pulled him away from their perfect moments, what shadows lived in his mind. On a Sunday morning 3 months after their first date, Betty woke up in Mark's bed feeling nauseous, her stomach churning in a way that had nothing to do with last night's dinner. She barely made it to the bathroom before getting sick, her stomach rebelling against something more than food. Food poisoning? Mark appeared in the doorway, concerned, his hair adorably disheveled from sleep, wearing just pajama pants. Maybe. Betty rinsed her mouth, trying to ignore the calculation happening in the back of her mind, the mental calendar that was suddenly screaming warnings. When was her last period? 3 weeks ago? 4? She couldn't remember exactly, and that uncertainty sent panic spiking through her veins. No, it couldn't be. They'd been careful. She bought the pregnancy test on her lunch break the next day, hands shaking as she paid cash like she was buying something illegal, like someone might recognize her and spread gossip. She took it in her office bathroom because she couldn't wait until she got home, couldn't spend another 8 hours in agonizing uncertainty, wondering and worrying. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately, clear and undeniable. Betty sat on the closed toilet lid, staring at the test clutched in her trembling hands, her entire world reorienting around those 2 pink lines, everything changing in an instant. A baby. Mark's baby. Their baby. Terror and joy warred in her chest, emotions so intense she couldn't separate them, couldn't tell which one was winning. They'd been careful. Mostly. There had been that one night when neither of them could wait, when passion overrode caution, when they'd convinced themselves it would be fine. What were the odds, really? Apparently, the odds were 100%. Betty pressed her hand to her still flat stomach, trying to imagine what was growing there. A baby. She was going to have a baby. A tiny person who was half her and half Mark, growing inside her right now, real and undeniable. The question that mattered most: what would Mark say? She spent a week planning the perfect moment, rehearsing different versions of the conversation in her head, trying to predict his reaction through every possible scenario, preparing for happiness, surprise, fear, anything. He'd be surprised, definitely, maybe scared. That was natural. But they'd been talking about the future lately, carefully testing the waters of something permanent, mentioning possibilities without quite committing. They'd discussed what they wanted from life, from love, from the years ahead. This would just accelerate the timeline, move up the schedule. But they could handle it. Together. They had to. On Friday evening, Betty took Mark back to the rooftop bar where he'd first convinced her to give him a chance after that rainy night outside her office. She'd made a reservation weeks ago at the same table, with the same view of the city lights stretching to the horizon, everything deliberately perfect. "This feels significant," Mark said, reading her mood with the intuition he'd developed over 3 months of learning her patterns and expressions. "Should I be worried?" "That depends on your definition of worried." Betty took his hand across the table, her heart hammering so hard she thought he might actually hear it pounding against her ribs. "Mark, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me, to listen with your whole heart and not just your head." His expression shifted, became guarded, something flickering behind his eyes that looked almost like fear. "Okay." She took a breath, committed to the jump. "I'm pregnant." The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug, like all the blood had suddenly left his body, complete, utter, devastating silence. Betty watched him process it, saw a dozen emotions flicker across his features too fast to name or understand. Fear, shock, something that might have been anger or panic or both combined into something worse. "Mark?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended, vulnerable in a way she hated. "Say something. Please." He pulled his hand away from hers. That simple gesture broke something inside her chest, a fracture that would never fully heal, no matter how much time passed. "How far along?" His voice was flat, emotionless, completely unlike the man who'd told her he loved her just last night, who'd whispered it against her skin. 8 weeks. I took the test a few days ago, but I wanted to be absolutely sure before I told you. I went to the doctor to confirm. 8 weeks. He repeated it like he was doing calculations, figuring out which night, which moment, which mistake had led them here. Jesus, Betty, Jesus Christ. I know this isn't what we planned. Planned? He laughed, sharp and bitter, and nothing like his usual warmth. Nothing like the man who'd stood in the rain for her. We didn't plan anything. We've been together 3 months. 3 months, Betty. This isn't, we can't what? Ice spread through her veins, cold and numbing and terrible. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound. He paced to the railing, his back to her, and stared out at the city spread below them like he was looking for escape routes. "Mark, look at me!" He didn't turn around. "Please." When he finally faced her, his expression was that of a stranger. Cold, distant. Nothing like the man who'd stood in the rain for 3 hours just to convince her to have dinner with him. Nothing like the man who'd promised he wasn't going anywhere. "Betty, I warned you." His voice was carefully controlled, each word precisely articulated like he was delivering a prepared statement he'd rehearsed. "We were just having fun. I didn't want your swell belly." The words hit her like physical blows, each one landing with devastating accuracy. She actually staggered backward, her hand instinctively moving to protect her stomach, to shield the life growing there from his cruelty. "What did you just say?" "This ruins everything." Mark was already backing toward the exit, putting distance between them like she was contaminated, like pregnancy was a disease he might catch. "My father, my family, the company. I have plans, Betty. Specific plans for my life. This isn't part of them. You can't be part of them. A baby definitely can't be part of them." She stood up on legs that somehow still worked, even though her entire world was collapsing around her, even though everything she'd believed was crumbling to dust. "You said you weren't going anywhere. You promised me." "I didn't promise this. We created this together. You can fix it." He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands, threw cash on the table with trembling fingers. More than enough to cover dinner, and whatever procedure would make this problem disappear, would erase the evidence of their 3 months together. The insult of it made her vision blur with rage and heartbreak combined. "I'll pay for whatever you need, the best doctors, private clinic, anything, just handle it. Please, make this go away." Betty's hand moved before her brain registered the decision, before she could think about consequences. The slap cracked across his face hard enough to snap his head to the side, hard enough to leave her palm stinging and his cheek blooming bright red. They both stood frozen, her palm stinging with the impact, his cheek blooming red with her handprint. "Don't ever contact me again," Betty said, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face, despite her heart shattering into pieces. "I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you. This baby and I will be just fine without you. Better than fine. We'll be perfect." She grabbed her purse and walked toward the exit, shoulders straight, head high, refusing to let him see her crumble, even though she was dying inside, even though every step felt impossible. "Betty, wait." She didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. The elevator doors closed on his stricken face, and only then, in the privacy of that descending box, did Betty let herself fall apart completely, sliding down the elevator wall and sobbing into her hands. Chapter 3. 5 years later. First attempt. The boardroom had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district, all steel and glass and corporate power, designed to intimidate anyone who walked through the doors. Betty Davis walked in like she owned the place, because in a way, she did. 5 years of building Davis Marketing Group from scratch, from nothing except determination and talent and sheer force of will, had taught her exactly how to command a room without saying a word, how to make men in expensive suits pay attention. She set her presentation materials on the gleaming conference table, nodding professionally at the assembled investors who were already taking their seats. Her assistant was running late with Tiger. Traffic downtown was always unpredictable on Tuesday mornings, but Betty had time before her pitch started, plenty of time to set up and center herself. Then she looked across the table, and her entire world tilted sideways. Mark Perry sat in the chair directly opposite hers, older than she remembered, harder around the edges with new lines etched around his eyes and mouth, but unmistakably him, the man who'd destroyed her, the father of her son, the ghost she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Their eyes locked across the polished conference table. Betty watched recognition hit him like a freight train, watched the realization dawn on his face, watched the color drain from his face completely, watched his hands grip the edge of the table like he needed something solid to hold onto, or he might actually fall out of his chair. She turned her attention to her laptop, fingers somehow steady as she opened her presentation file, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. 5 years. She'd built an empire in 5 years, raised her son alone through sleepless nights and teething and first steps, survived every impossible moment when she thought she couldn't go on. She wasn't going to let Mark Perry rattle her now. She was stronger than that. She had to be. "Mama!" Betty's heart stopped beating. Tiger burst through the conference room door, her assistant chasing after him apologetically, clearly having lost the battle to keep him outside. Her beautiful 4-year-old son, with his bright smile and boundless energy, and eyes that were exactly, unmistakably, Mark Perry's eyes, staring out from a miniature version of Mark's face. "Baby, you're supposed to wait outside." Betty scooped him up in her arms, but it was too late. The damage was done. Mark was staring at Tiger like he'd seen a ghost. No, like he'd seen his own face reflected back at him from 4 years in the past, undeniable proof of what he'd thrown away. The room had gone completely silent, every investor frozen and watching. "I'm sorry, Ms. Davis," her assistant stammered, looking mortified. "He got away from me in the elevator." "It's fine." Betty kept her voice calm, professional, even though her heart was trying to break out of her chest, even though she wanted to scream. "Tiger, sweetheart, can you go with Miss Rachel? Mama needs to work now." "But I wanted to show you my drawing." Tiger held up a piece of paper covered in crayon scribbles that might have been a dinosaur or might have been a dragon. She couldn't quite tell. "It's beautiful, baby." Betty kissed his forehead, breathing in his little boy scent of soap and crayons and innocence, grounding herself in the reality of her son. "I'll look at it after my meeting, okay? We'll hang it on the fridge." "Okay, Mama." Tiger hugged her tight with his whole small body, then let the assistant lead him out of the room, waving goodbye to all the serious grown-ups. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like thunder. Betty straightened her blazer and returned to her presentation setup, acutely aware of every eye in the room watching her. Watching Mark, waiting for the explosion that didn't come. "Shall we begin?" she said calmly, her voice not betraying anything. The meeting was torture that lasted an eternity. Betty delivered her pitch flawlessly, years of practice making the presentation second nature, even while her mind screamed and her heart pounded. Mark didn't speak, didn't ask a single question, just sat there staring at her like she'd personally destroyed his entire understanding of reality, like the world had shifted on its axis. When it ended after an excruciating 45 minutes, Betty packed up her materials with efficient precision. The other investors filed out, murmuring among themselves, casting curious glances between her and Mark that spoke volumes. Then they were alone in the conference room. "Betty." "No." She didn't look at him, just continued organizing her files with mechanical precision. "We have nothing to discuss, absolutely nothing." That boy is none of your business. He has my eyes. Mark's voice cracked with emotion she didn't want to hear. Betty, is he... I said we have nothing to discuss. Betty snapped her briefcase closed with more force than necessary and finally met his gaze directly. The pain in his eyes was so raw it almost made her falter, almost made her feel sorry for him. Almost. You made your choice 5 years ago. Live with it. She walked out, her heels clicking against the polished floor with deliberate rhythm, feeling his devastation like a physical presence behind her, heavy and suffocating. That afternoon, Mark appeared in the lobby of her office building like a ghost she couldn't exorcise. Betty was heading out for a late lunch when she spotted him through the glass doors, spotted him immediately, even in the crowded lobby. He was pacing near the security desk, his suit rumpled like he'd been wearing it all day without caring, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. She could have taken the back exit. Should have. It would have been easier. Instead, she pushed through the doors and walked right past him toward the parking garage, her chin up, her spine straight. "Betty, please!" His voice carried across the lobby, loud enough that people turned to stare. "Just 5 minutes, 5 minutes of your time." She kept walking, her heels clicking against marble. "I need to know. Is he mine?" That made her stop walking, turn around, march back across the lobby until she was close enough to speak without shouting, close enough to see the desperation in his bloodshot eyes. "You lost the right to ask me anything when you threw money at me and told me to handle it." Her voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with 5 years of suppressed rage. "You don't get to show up 5 years later and demand answers like you have some kind of right. Please." He was begging now, right there in front of the security guards and the business people crossing the lobby, his pride completely gone. "Just tell me, is he my son?" Betty looked at this man who'd destroyed her 5 years ago, who'd called their child, their beautiful, perfect child, her swell belly like it was something disgusting, something shameful, who'd run when she needed him most, when she was terrified and alone. "His name is Tiger," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "He's 4 years old. He loves dinosaurs and mac and cheese and bedtime stories about dragons. He asks about his father sometimes, asks why he doesn't have a daddy. I tell him his father isn't part of our lives. That's all you need to know. Betty, that's all you get. Now leave before I call security and have you forcibly removed from the building." She walked away, but this time she heard him follow, heard his footsteps behind her. "I'll wait," he called after her, his voice echoing off the marble. "I'll wait right here until you talk to me. I'll wait all day if I have to." Betty didn't respond, got in her car, drove away without looking back. When she came back 3 hours later, he was still there, sitting on the lobby couch like he'd taken up residence. Security hovering nearby, clearly unsure what to do about a man who technically wasn't causing a disturbance but also wouldn't leave no matter how many times they asked. Betty walked past him again without acknowledgement, took the elevator to her 20th floor office, stood at her window looking down at the street below, watching the tiny figures move like ants. 2 hours later, she checked again. He was on the sidewalk now, security having finally convinced him he couldn't camp in the lobby indefinitely, just standing there in the cold, watching the building, like if he stared hard enough, she'd come down and talk to him. When Betty left at 7 o'clock, he was still there looking half frozen. "Miss Davis." He stepped into her path, his lips slightly blue from the cold. "No." She walked around him like he was a piece of furniture. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please just let me..." "Let you what?" She whirled on him, 5 years of rage finally breaking through her professional facade like a dam bursting. "Let you meet him. Let you explain yourself. Let you what, Mark?" "I don't know." His voice broke completely, raw and desperate. "I don't know what I'm asking for. When I saw him today, when I saw his face..." "You saw what you threw away 5 years ago." Betty's hands were shaking with rage and adrenaline. "You saw the child you told me to get rid of, the swell belly you didn't want. Is that what you're looking for now? Absolution, forgiveness, some kind of redemption?" "I'm looking for a chance." You had your chance." Her voice cracked with emotion. 5 years ago, when I stood on that rooftop and told you I was pregnant and terrified, when I needed you to be brave and you ran like a coward. You don't get another chance. You get nothing from me. Nothing." She turned and walked to her car, and this time when he called after her, she didn't stop, didn't pause, didn't give him anything. But when she got home and put Tiger to bed that night, she stood in his doorway, watching him sleep for a long time, watching his little chest rise and fall with each breath, his perfect face that was Mark's face in miniature, undeniable genetics. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that could only be him. "I know I don't deserve anything, but he's my son. Please, just let me try. Let me prove I've changed." Betty deleted it without responding, her finger stabbing the delete button. But she didn't block the number. That was her mistake, because 3 days later, the letters started arriving at her home address, thick envelopes with her name written in Mark's handwriting that she recognized from 5 years ago. Chapter 4. The Burned Letter. The envelope was thick, expensive stationery, delivered to Betty's home address by private courier who required a signature. She stared at it over her morning coffee while Tiger ate cereal and chatted about the T-Rex episode of his favorite show, his mouth full of Cheerios. Her name written in Mark's handwriting, she recognized it from the notes he used to leave her, back when she'd been foolish enough to believe in his promises, back when she'd thought he was different. "Mama, you're not listening," Tiger complained, waving his spoon for emphasis. "Sorry, baby." Betty tucked the envelope into her purse unopened, not ready to deal with whatever Mark had written. "Tell me again about the T-Rex and the hunting strategies." Tiger launched into an enthusiastic explanation involving teeth and pack hunting and the Cretaceous period, while Betty tried to focus, tried to be present for her son, tried not to think about the letter burning a hole through her bag like it was made of fire. She dropped Tiger at preschool. He'd been going for 6 months now, thriving in the structured environment and making friends, and drove to her office in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities. The letter sat on her desk all morning while she worked through emails and conference calls and tried to pretend it didn't exist. Finally, during her lunch break when her office was quiet, she opened it with trembling hands. The letter was 5 pages, handwritten in careful script, his words bleeding across expensive paper like wounds that wouldn't heal. "Betty, I don't know how to start this except to say I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate. I know they don't change what I did or how I hurt you or the 5 years you've spent raising our son alone. But I need to say them anyway, need you to know that I understand the magnitude of my failure. When you told me you were pregnant 5 years ago, I panicked. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth I've finally had the courage to face. I saw my entire life shifting, my father's expectations, the company's future, and I ran. I chose the easy path, the coward's path, and I've regretted it every single day since. Every morning I wake up knowing what I threw away. I've thought about you constantly over these 5 years, wondered if you kept the baby, wondered if you hated me as much as I deserved, wondered if I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too weak to be the man you needed. Then I saw him, Tiger, our son, and my entire world stopped rotating. He has my eyes, Betty, my smile, my expressions. He's beautiful and perfect, and I missed everything. His birth, his first steps, his first words, his first laugh. 5 years of moments I'll never get back because I was too scared to be what you needed me to be. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, will never deserve it. I'm not even asking you to let me be his father. I know I haven't earned that right and might never earn it. I'm just asking for a chance to try, to prove I'm not that same coward who ran, to show you that I've spent 5 years becoming someone better, someone worthy. Please, Betty. Just one conversation, just one chance to explain face to face. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I know that doesn't matter now, that it's too late, but I needed you to know anyway. Mark. Betty read it 3 times, each time feeling her resolve weaken slightly, each word perfectly crafted to pull at her heart, to make her remember the man she'd loved. each apology designed to crack her resolve, to make her wonder if maybe, just maybe, people could change. She could picture him writing this late at night, agonizing over every sentence, believing his words would matter, would make a difference. They didn't. At 6 o'clock, Betty picked Tiger up from preschool, listening to him babble about his day. He was covered in finger paint and bubbling with stories about the castle they'd built and the song they'd learned. She listened to every word, asked questions, celebrated his achievements, all while the letter sat in her purse like poison, like something toxic she couldn't quite throw away. After dinner, after bath time, after reading 3 books about dinosaurs and singing 2 lullabies, Tiger finally fell asleep in his dinosaur pajamas, his stuffed T-Rex clutched in his small arms. Betty stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching him breathe, watching his chest rise and fall with the peaceful sleep of a child who felt safe and loved. Then she went to the living room, turned on the gas fireplace with shaking hands, and pulled out Mark's letter one final time. She read it again by firelight, let herself feel the full impact of his words, let herself remember loving him, trusting him, believing in him, let herself feel the pain of his regret, the sincerity of his apology. Then she held the first page to the flames and watched it catch. The paper caught instantly, curling black at the edges, Mark's careful handwriting disappearing into ash and smoke. She watched Mark's carefully chosen words disappear into ash, 5 pages of apologies becoming nothing, page after page, until all 5 were gone, until nothing remained but grey powder. She took a photo of the ashes scattered on her marble hearth, black and grey against white stone, sent it to Mark's number with no caption, no explanation, just the image of his destroyed words. The response came immediately, her phone buzzing almost before she'd set it down. Please, don't shut me out. I meant every word I wrote. Another text, seconds later. I'll write 100 more letters if that's what it takes. Another. Just give me a chance to prove I've changed. Betty typed one sentence. You had your chance 5 years ago. You wasted it. Don't contact me again. Then she blocked his number and deleted the message thread. She should have felt victorious, powerful, in control of the situation. Instead, she felt tired and empty and sad. The next morning, flowers arrived at her office before she'd even taken off her coat. Not roses this time. Sunflowers, her favorite, though she'd only mentioned it once, 5 years ago, in a conversation she'd assumed he'd forgotten. The card read, "For Tiger. I know they won't make up for anything, but they're his birthday flowers, 5 years late. I'm sorry I wasn't there. M." Tiger's birthday had been 3 months ago. Mark had done his research, had clearly looked up records somehow. Betty had them donated to the children's hospital without a second thought. But when more flowers came the next day, and the day after that, each bouquet accompanied by a card with some small detail about Tiger that Mark had somehow learned, she had to tell her assistant to refuse all deliveries, to send everything back. He's very persistent, her assistant observed carefully, clearly trying not to overstep. He's very delusional if he thinks flowers will fix 5 years, Betty corrected sharply. A week after the burned letter, Betty was leaving a client dinner downtown around 9 o'clock when she spotted Mark across the street, just standing there on the sidewalk in the cold evening air, watching her building, waiting like he had nothing better to do, nowhere better to be. She got in her car without acknowledging him, without even looking in his direction, but he was there the next night too, and the night after that, always in the same spot, always watching, always waiting. On the 4th night she confronted him, her patience finally snapping, marched across the street and got right in his face, her rage barely controlled. "This is harassment. I could call the police right now. I'm on a public sidewalk." His voice was hoarse, like he'd been standing in the cold too long, like he'd been doing this for days. "I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just standing here. You're breaking my patience, which is far more dangerous." "Good." His eyes were bloodshot, desperate, rimmed with dark circles. "At least you're feeling something. At least you're acknowledging I exist instead of pretending I'm invisible. You don't exist to me, Mark. You're a ghost. A mistake I made 5 years ago that I've spent 5 years trying to forget." I'm Tiger's father. You're a sperm donor who happened to contribute genetic material." The words were cruel, and she meant them to be, wanted them to hurt. Fathers show up. Fathers stay. Fathers hold their children when they're born. Fathers don't throw money at problems and run away like cowards. He flinched like she'd struck him, actually stepped backward. "Let me fix this. Please, just give me a chance to fix what I broke." "There's nothing to fix. We're fine without you. Better than fine, actually. Tiger is happy and loved, and he doesn't need you confusing his life or making promises you won't keep. He deserves to know his father. He deserves better than you. He deserves someone who wanted him from the beginning, not someone who's feeling guilty 5 years too late." Betty turned and walked away, but his voice followed her across the street, echoing off the buildings. "I'll keep trying, Betty. I'll keep showing up. I'm not running anymore. I'm done being that coward." She didn't respond, got in her car and drove home to her son, her beautiful boy who'd never known his father's rejection, who'd never felt unwanted or like a burden. Tiger was playing with his dinosaurs when she arrived, the babysitter reporting a perfect evening with no problems. "Mama!" He crashed into her legs for a hug, his small arms tight around her knees. "Can we read the T-Rex book tonight? The one with the pictures?" "Of course, baby." Betty scooped him up, breathing in his little boy scent of soap and outside air. "We can read whatever you want. We can read 10 T-Rex books if you want." Later, after stories and songs and goodnight kisses, after Tiger was safely asleep, Betty stood in her kitchen staring at her phone with shaking hands. Mark had found a way around the block, a new number, one text message waiting. "I saw him today, at the park with your babysitter. I didn't approach, didn't try to talk to him. I just watched him play from across the street. He laughs like you do. He's perfect in every way. Thank you for raising him so well. Even if you never let me near him, thank you for giving him life when I told you not to." Betty's hands shook as she blocked this number too, her fingers trembling with rage and something else she didn't want to name. But the image stayed with her all night. Mark watching from a distance, not approaching, not interfering, just observing the child he'd abandoned, the son he'd thrown away, part of her, the part that remembered loving him, that remembered believing his promises, felt something twist painfully in her chest. The rest of her remembered his face when she'd told him she was pregnant, remembered him backing away like she was contaminated, remembered the words "swell belly" like it was a curse, like their child was something shameful. She deleted the message, stabbing the delete button harder than necessary. But she didn't delete the screenshot she'd taken first, the one she saved in a hidden folder she told herself she'd delete eventually. Another mistake in a series of mistakes that would lead her exactly where she didn't want to go, down a path she'd sworn she'd never walk again. Chapter 5. The School Confrontation. Betty was in the middle of a presentation when her phone buzzed with a notification from Tiger's preschool. "Unknown person observed outside playground. Please confirm authorized pickup list." Her blood ran cold. She excused herself and called the school director immediately. "Ms. Davis, there's a man standing across the street from our playground," the director said calmly. "He's not on school property, but our teachers noticed him watching during outdoor time." "What does he look like?" Betty already knew. Tall, mid-30s, brown hair, expensive suit, just standing there watching the children. "I'm on my way." Betty grabbed her purse, her pulse pounding. The drive normally took 20 minutes. She made it in 12. Mark Perry stood across the street from the playground exactly as described, his hands in his pockets, watching Tiger climb on the jungle gym. Betty parked illegally and crossed the street like a missile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mark startled, guilt flashing across his face. "I wasn't going to approach. You're watching my son at his school." Betty's voice rose loud enough that parents turned to stare. "You're lurking outside a preschool like a predator. I just wanted to see him." "See him?" She got in his face, vibrating with rage. "I should call the police right now." The school director had come outside. "Ms. Davis, is everything all right?" This man is not authorized to be near my son. Betty spoke clearly, making sure everyone heard. If you see him anywhere near this school again, call the police immediately. Of course. The director looked at Mark coolly. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately. I wasn't doing anything wrong, Mark started. You were watching children without permission. Betty cut him off. That's the definition of wrong. Get out of here before this becomes your worst day. She watched him walk to his car, her hands shaking. When his car disappeared, the director touched her arm gently. Are you safe, Ms. Davis? He's Tiger's biological father, Betty said quietly, aware of other parents listening. He abandoned us when I was pregnant. Now he wants to be involved. He won't be. Tiger is safe. The director nodded. We'll make sure security is aware. No one matching his description will be allowed near the school. Betty collected Tiger from his classroom. He ran to her with his usual enthusiasm, oblivious. Mama, we made butterflies today. Want to see? Of course, baby. Betty forced her voice steady. Show me everything. That night, after Tiger was asleep, her phone rang from an unknown number. What? She snapped. I'm sorry. Mark's voice was raw. You're right. Showing up at his school was wrong. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed to see him. And what did you see? Her voice was ice. Did you see the 4-year-old who asks me why he doesn't have a daddy, the child I've raised alone? I saw my son. His voice broke. I saw a beautiful little boy who should know his father. You're not his father. You're a stranger. Fathers show up. Fathers stay. Fathers don't watch from across the street. I want to stay now. Let me stay. It's 5 years too late. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Betty's voice softened slightly. You made your choice when I needed you most. You don't get to unmake it now. This isn't about guilt. Then what is it about? Love. You loved me so much you told me to handle our baby. Silence, heavy and painful. I was a coward, Mark finally said. You're right. I was scared and selfish, and I made the worst decision of my life, but I'm trying to fix it now. You can't fix this, Mark. Some things stay broken. She hung up and blocked the number, but standing at Tiger's door watching him sleep, she couldn't shake Mark's words. I saw my son. The pain in his voice had been real. The regret, genuine. It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. Tiger deserved better than a father who only wanted him now because he'd seen what he was missing. Betty went to her room and pulled out the box from her closet. The ultrasound photos Mark never saw. The hospital bracelet from Tiger's birth. The first photo of her son, wrinkled and perfect and hers. She'd done this alone. Every moment, every milestone. Mark didn't get to claim fatherhood now. Her phone buzzed. Another new number. I understand you hate me. You should. But Tiger deserves to know where he comes from. He deserves both parents if they're willing. I'm willing now. I know I'm late, but I'm here. Betty stared at the message before typing. Being willing isn't enough. Being willing 5 years late doesn't count. You should have been willing when I told you I was pregnant. Don't contact me again. She blocked the number, put her phone on Do Not Disturb, crawled into bed exhausted. But sleep didn't come easy. Because part of her, the part that had loved Mark once, kept hearing his broken voice saying, I saw my son, like it was both revelation and tragedy. She told that part to shut up. It didn't listen. Chapter 6. The Mother's Humiliation. 3 weeks of silence made Betty hope Mark had finally given up. Then his mother appeared in her office lobby. Mrs. Perry was exactly as Betty remembered from society pages. Elegant, expensive, every hair in perfect place. She sat in the lobby like she owned the building. Betty's assistant appeared looking nervous. Ms. Davis, there's a Mrs. Perry here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very insistent. Send her up. Betty set down her pen with deliberate calm. Let's get this over with. Mrs. Perry entered with measured grace. Her gaze swept the space, the windows, the modern furniture, the awards, before settling on Betty with cool appraisal. Ms. Davis, thank you for seeing me. I didn't realize I had a choice. Betty gestured to the chair. Please, sit. Mrs. Perry remained standing. I'll be brief. I understand you have a child, a 4-year-old boy. I do. My son seems to believe the child is his. Betty leaned back, studying the woman who'd raised Mark. Your son is correct. Something flickered in Mrs. Perry's expression. Surprise, perhaps. I see. And in the 5 years since this child's birth, you never informed our family. Inform you? Betty's laugh was sharp. Your son told me to handle it. He threw money at me. Why would I inform a family that clearly didn't want us? Mrs. Perry's jaw tightened. Nevertheless, the child exists. He carries Perry blood. He deserves to know his heritage. His heritage. Betty stood up. Let me tell you about his heritage, Mrs. Perry. His heritage is a mother who worked 3 jobs while pregnant. His heritage is midnight feedings and doctor's appointments I attended alone. His heritage is every moment of his life that I gave him without any help from your family. That was your choice. It was your son's choice. Betty's voice rose. I didn't hide Tiger from Mark. Mark chose to know nothing about him, so forgive me if I'm not grateful you've suddenly decided to acknowledge my son's existence. Mrs. Perry's composure cracked. Our family has resources, connections, opportunities that a child deserves. That a child deserves. Betty came around her desk. Your son told me he didn't want my swell belly. Those were his exact words. And now you're here talking about what my son deserves. I'm talking about what the child deserves as a Perry. His name is Tiger. Betty's voice dropped to something dangerous. And he's not a Perry, he's a Davis. I made sure of that when I filled out his birth certificate alone in a hospital room. Mrs. Perry's eyes narrowed. You're being deliberately difficult. I'm being a mother, something you clearly failed at if you raised a son who abandons pregnant women. The slap came fast, Mrs. Perry's hand connecting with Betty's cheek before either of them registered the movement. They both froze. Betty touched her stinging cheek, her eyes never leaving Mrs. Perry's face. When she spoke, her voice was absolutely calm. Get out of my office. Ms. Davis, get out before I call security. Betty walked to her door and opened it. And tell your son that sending his mother to fight his battles proves how much of a coward he still is. Mrs. Perry gathered her composure, smoothing her jacket. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Betty held the door open. You and your family had 5 years to care about Tiger. You don't get to care now. Mrs. Perry walked out with her dignity intact, but her mission failed. Betty closed the door and leaned against it, her cheek burning, her hands shaking. Her assistant knocked softly. Miss Davis, are you all right? I'm fine. Betty straightened. Hold my calls for the rest of the afternoon. She made it back to her desk before the tears started. Not because of the slap, but because Mark had sent his mother, had used her like a weapon, had proven again that he didn't have the courage to face Betty himself. Her phone buzzed, Mark's newest number. My mother just called. She said you were disrespectful and made accusations. What happened? Betty's fingers flew across the keyboard. Your mother slapped me. But don't worry, I expect exactly nothing from your family, including basic decency. The response came immediately. She did what? Betty, I'm so sorry. I didn't ask her to. You keep saying you're sorry. You keep sending people to do your dirty work. First flowers, then letters, then stalking my son's school, now your mother. When are you going to understand that I don't want your apologies? Then what do you want? Betty stared at that message. What did she want? She wanted 5 years back. She wanted the man who'd stood in the rain. She wanted the Mark who'd promised he wasn't going anywhere. She wanted the impossible. Finally, she typed, I want you to leave us alone. She put her phone away and didn't look at it for the rest of the day. That evening, when she picked Tiger up, he was unusually quiet. What's wrong, baby? Some of the kids were talking about their daddies today. Tiger's voice was small. Jake's daddy is teaching him to ride a bike, and Emma's daddy took her to the zoo. Betty's heart cracked. Tiger, why don't I have a daddy, Mama? She'd prepared for this conversation 100 times. But sitting in traffic with her 4-year-old, asking the question she dreaded, all her preparations evaporated. You have me, baby, and I love you enough for 2 parents. But where is he? My daddy? Betty pulled over, unable to drive and have this conversation. She turned to look at his serious little face. Your daddy. He wasn't ready to be a daddy when you were born. Is he ready now? The question gutted her, because the answer was probably yes. Mark was ready now, desperate even, but being ready 5 years late didn't count. I don't know, Tiger, but you're the most important thing in my whole world, and we're doing just fine, you and me, right? Tiger considered this with 4-year-old gravity. Yeah, we're doing good, Mama. That's right, baby. We're doing good. She pulled back into traffic, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. That night, after Tiger was asleep, Betty finally checked her phone. 17 messages from Mark. She didn't read most of them, but the last one stopped her. My mother had no right to go to your office, no right to say what she said, and absolutely no right to touch you. I'm furious with her, but I know this is my fault. Everything is my fault. I put this in motion 5 years ago when I was too weak to be what you needed. I understand if you never forgive me. But Tiger asked about me today, didn't he? I can feel it. Please, Betty, don't let him grow up thinking his father didn't want him, because I do. I want him more than anything. Betty stared at those words until they blurred. How did he know? How did he know that Tiger had asked about him today? She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "Stop pretending you can feel what's happening in our lives. You lost that right." But she didn't block the number this time. That was her next mistake. Chapter 7. The Public Begging. The charity gala was the social event of the season. 500 of the city's elite gathered in a crystal ballroom to raise money for children's literacy programs. Betty normally avoided these events like the plague, but her company had donated significantly this year, and her presence was expected, practically mandatory. She wore a midnight blue gown that made her feel powerful and beautiful, her hair swept up elegantly, her armor perfectly in place. She should have known Mark would be there, should have checked the guest list. He stood across the ballroom talking to a group of investors, looking uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Betty watched something desperate flash across his face before he excused himself from his conversation. She turned away deliberately, engaging in conversation with a potential client about expanding her services. But she felt Mark's gaze on her all night, tracking her movements, waiting for an opportunity. Betty was talking to the program director about expanding her company's donations when Mark appeared at her elbow like a ghost. "Excuse me," he said to the director with forced politeness. "May I borrow Ms. Davis for a moment?" "We're in the middle of a conversation," Betty said coolly, not looking at him. "It'll just take a minute." "No." She turned her back on him completely. Mark stepped around to face her again, determination in his eyes. "Betty, please." "You're making a scene," she hissed. "I don't care." His voice was loud enough that nearby conversations started faltering, people turning to watch. "I need to talk to you." The program director excused herself hastily, clearly sensing drama and wanting no part of it. Betty set her champagne glass down with careful precision. "You have 30 seconds, then I'm calling security." "That's not enough time." 25 seconds now." Mark looked around at the growing circle of curious onlookers, seemed to make a decision, and dropped to his knees right there on the ballroom floor. The entire ballroom went silent, like someone had cut the sound. Betty stared down at him in absolute horror, her face burning. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done 5 years ago." Mark's voice carried across the suddenly quiet room, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "I'm begging you. Please give me a chance. Please let me meet my son. Please let me try to fix what I broke." 200 people were watching now, phones coming out. Society bloggers probably already posting updates to their followers. Betty's face burned with humiliation. "Get up! Not until you hear me!" I said get up. She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him to his feet, but he stayed on his knees, stubborn. I love you, Mark said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough that the words echoed. I've loved you for 5 years, every single day. I was a coward when you needed me to be brave. I ran when I should have stayed. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was scared of my father, scared of change, scared of everything. Mark! Betty's voice cracked, humiliation and rage warring in her chest. Tell me what you want, he begged, his eyes never leaving hers. Anything. I'll do anything. Just please don't shut me out. Don't keep our son from knowing his father. Don't make him grow up thinking I didn't want him. The crowd was eating this up. Betty could see the judgment in some faces, the sympathy in others, the gleeful scandal-mongering in still more. She leaned down close enough that only Mark could hear her whisper, "You want to know what I want?" "Yes." His eyes were desperate, hopeful, pleading. "I want you to stand up. I want you to walk out of this ballroom, and I want you to never pull this manipulative garbage again. This isn't love. This is a performance." "Betty!" She straightened, spoke loud enough for the audience to hear clearly. "Mr. Perry and I had a brief relationship years ago. It ended badly. That's all anyone needs to know." She started to walk away, her head high. Mark's voice followed her across the marble floor. "I'll keep trying. I'm not giving up on us." Betty stopped, turned, walked back to where he was finally getting to his feet, brushing off his knees. She kept her voice low, deadly calm. "You want terms? Fine. I'll give you terms. Break your engagement." Mark's face went white, all color draining. "What?" "Oh yes, I know about your engagement." Betty smiled without warmth, without anything kind. "You're marrying Nina Williams in 3 months. Business arrangement to save your failing company, from what my research tells me. That's not... How did you... "I run a marketing firm, Mark. I make it my business to know everything about my business contacts, including the fact that you're engaged to be married while begging me on your knees in ballrooms. Rather hypocritical, don't you think?" The crowd shifted, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Mark looked sick, actually green. "The engagement isn't what you think. I don't care what it is." Betty spoke clearly, making sure he heard every word, making sure everyone heard. "You want to prove you're not the same coward who ran 5 years ago? Break your engagement. Stand in front of everyone who matters to you, your family, your business partners, all these people watching us right now, and choose us. Choose Tiger. Lose everything that made you walk away the first time. Betty, prove you're different now. Prove you can sacrifice for us the way I've sacrificed everything for 5 years. Then, maybe, and I mean maybe, I'll let you meet your son." She leaned even closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "But we both know you won't do it. You'll choose your comfortable life just like you did before. So stop pretending you've changed. Stop the performance." Betty walked away, her head high, her shoulders straight, leaving Mark standing in the middle of the ballroom with 200 witnesses to his public humiliation. She made it to her car before the shaking started, before her legs gave out. She'd given him impossible terms, terms he could never meet, terms designed to prove he was still the same man who'd run, still the same coward. But a small, treacherous part of her wondered, what if he actually did it? Her phone buzzed before she even made it out of the parking garage. "You want me to prove it? Fine, I'll prove it. Watch me." Betty stared at that message, her heart hammering against her ribs. He wouldn't. He couldn't possibly. The Perry family business was hanging by a thread. The Williams merger was his father's dying wish, his last hope. Breaking the engagement would destroy everything Mark had worked for. Mark was desperate, but he wasn't stupid. He wasn't insane enough to actually do it. Another message. "I have 3 months until the wedding. I'll do it, Betty. I'll choose you. I'll choose Tiger. I'll choose us." She typed back, "I don't believe you. You'll back down like you always do." "Then watch me prove you wrong." Betty drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities she didn't want to consider. She'd called his bluff, given him a challenge he couldn't possibly meet, given him an out to walk away with his dignity. Except, what if he didn't walk away? What if Mark Perry actually destroyed everything to prove he'd changed? Betty pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at her dark house where her son slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos swirling around him. She'd been so sure Mark would back down, would prove her right about him being a coward, about him choosing comfort over them. But the certainty in his messages rattled her, made her doubt her assumptions. She went inside, checked on Tiger sleeping peacefully, then stood in her kitchen staring at her phone. One more message from Mark. I love you. I love our son. And I'm going to prove it even if it costs me everything I have, even if I end up with nothing. Betty didn't respond, because she didn't know what to say to a man who might actually be telling the truth. Chapter 8. The Impossible Choice. The next morning, society blogs exploded with photos and videos from the gala, the internet having a field day. Perrier proposes reconciliation to mystery woman in dramatic scene. Who is the mother of Mark Perry's secret love child? Perry Williams' engagement in jeopardy after ballroom confession? Betty ignored them all, deleted notifications without reading, but her phone rang constantly anyway. Clients asking questions, friends demanding details and explanations. Her assistant fielding calls from reporters offering money for exclusive interviews. She put her phone on silent and focused on work, buried herself in quarterly reports. Then the call came from Mark's lawyer that changed everything. Ms. Davis, this is Richard Thornton representing Mr. Perry. My client wishes to establish paternity and discuss custody arrangements. Tell your client to talk to me directly, Betty interrupted, her voice sharp. Not through lawyers, not through his mother, not through public spectacles at charity events. If Mark wants to have a conversation like an adult, he can be an adult about it. She hung up before the lawyer could respond. 5 minutes later, Mark called from yet another new number. No lawyers, he said without preamble, his voice rough. I promise. Richard was acting on his own initiative. My father sent him without asking me. Your family's trying to take my son. Betty's voice was flat, emotionless. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Now that they know Tiger exists, now that it's public, they want him. They want a Perrier. No! I swear, Betty, I didn't ask Richard to call you. My father is furious about the gala, about you, about everything. He's trying to control the situation the only way he knows how. By threatening me with custody battles, by using lawyers as weapons. I won't let that happen. I've already fired Richard. Tiger stays with you. I'm not trying to take him away. I would never do that. Then what are you trying to do, Mark? Silence. Then, I told Nina everything. Betty's breath caught in her throat. You what? I told her everything about you, about Tiger, about the gala, about what I'm planning to do. She has a right to know why I can't marry her, why this engagement can't continue. Mark, her family is threatening lawsuits, breach of contract. They're talking about destroying what's left of my company, suing for damages. His laugh was hollow, broken. My father called me from his hospital bed to disown me, said if I break this engagement I'm dead to him, said I'm not his son anymore. Betty sat down slowly, her legs giving out. So don't break it. Don't be stupid. What? You heard me. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart, despite the chaos in her head. Don't break it. Marry Nina. Save your company. Keep your family. I don't want you to lose everything. I don't want that responsibility. You don't mean that. I do. And she realized she actually did mean it, despite everything. I gave you those terms because I thought you'd never meet them. I thought it would prove you haven't changed, prove you're still the same coward. But if you actually go through with this, if you actually destroy your life for us, Tiger and I don't need that guilt. We don't need you to be a martyr. It's not about guilt. Then what is it about? Betty's voice rose despite her attempts to stay calm. Love? You love us so much, you're willing to lose everything? That's not love, Mark. That's desperation. That's you trying to fix 5 years of regret in one grand gesture. That's not what Tiger needs. You're wrong. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're making the same selfish choice you made 5 years ago. Back then, you chose your comfortable life over us. Now you want to choose us and make yourself into a tragic hero. Either way, it's about what you want, what you need, not what's best for Tiger. The line went quiet for a long moment. What do you want, Betty? Mark's voice was barely a whisper, defeated. You give me impossible terms, then tell me not to meet them. You say you hate me, but you won't let me walk away completely. What do you actually want from me? Betty closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I want you to have wanted us 5 years ago. I want you to have stood beside me when I was pregnant and scared and alone. I want you to have held Tiger when he was born. I want all the things I can never have, all the moments you stole from us. So I'm damned either way, no matter what I do. Yes. The word came out broken, honest. You are. Because you can't undo what you did. You can sacrifice everything now, but it won't change the fact that you ran. It won't give me back those 5 years. It won't give Tiger back the father he should have had from the very beginning. I know. Mark's voice cracked completely. I know I can't fix it, but I'm trying anyway. Because what else can I do? Just give up and accept I destroyed everything? Live with it, Betty said quietly. Live with what you did. Make your choice and live with the consequences like an adult. I already made my choice. I choose you. I choose Tiger. I choose us. Even if it destroys you, especially then, because maybe I deserve to be destroyed for what I did. Betty hung up and sat in her office staring at nothing, her mind spinning. He was actually going to do it, despite her telling him not to, despite the warnings, despite the consequences, despite everything logical. Mark Perry was going to walk away from his family, his company, his entire comfortable life. For her, for Tiger, for a chance at redemption he might never actually get. She should have felt victorious, should have felt powerful. Instead, she felt terrified of what came next. That night, Betty dreamed about the rooftop 5 years ago. About Mark's face when she told him she was pregnant, about the exact moment she watched him decide to run, about the cold spreading through her body as she realized he was going to abandon her. She woke up gasping, reaching for her phone before she was fully conscious. She typed, "Don't do this. Please. Just marry Nina and leave us alone. We'll be fine without you." She stared at the message for 5 minutes before hitting send, her thumb hovering over the button. Mark's response came instantly, like he'd been waiting by his phone. Too late. The wedding's off. Nina knows everything. My father's disowning me officially. I'm all in, Betty. There's no going back now, even if I wanted to. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was 5 years ago on that rooftop. Everything since then has just been trying to survive without you, trying to pretend I didn't destroy my entire future. Betty threw her phone across the room, heard it hit the wall. She'd given him the terms to prove he'd fail, to prove he was still a coward, to prove nothing had changed. Instead, he was proving he'd changed completely, and somehow that was worse. Because now she had to decide, could she forgive him? Did she even want to try? Tiger appeared in her doorway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mama? Why are you awake? I heard a noise." "Bad dream, baby." Betty opened her arms, and Tiger crawled into her lap, warm and solid, and real and perfect. "Want me to stay with you, like you stay with me?" he offered seriously, his small arms around her neck. "Yes, please." She held him close, breathing in his little boy scent of soap and sleep. "Mama, remember when I asked about my daddy?" Betty's heart stopped completely. "Yes?" "Jake at school says daddies are important, that every kid should have one. Is that true?" "Tiger, do you think my daddy would like me if he met me? Would he think I'm good?" The question shattered her into pieces. "Baby, your daddy would love you. You're the most wonderful person in the whole world. Anyone would be lucky to know you. Then why doesn't he visit? Why doesn't he want to see me?" "Because he's a coward. Because he ran. Because he didn't want us 5 years ago." But looking at Tiger's hopeful face, at those eyes that were exactly Mark's eyes, Betty couldn't say any of that. It's complicated, baby. Jake says that's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain things. Betty laughed, despite everything, despite the tears on her face. Jake sounds very wise for a 4-year-old. So, will you explain? Please. She took a breath, made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff blindfolded. Your daddy made a mistake a long time ago, but he's trying to fix it now. He wants to meet you very much, more than anything. Tiger's eyes went wide with wonder. Really? He wants to meet me? Really? When? When can I meet him? I don't know yet, sweetheart. Mama has to think about some things first. Make sure it's safe. Okay. Tiger hugged her tight with his whole body. I love you, Mama. You're the best mama in the whole world. I love you too, baby. More than anything in the universe. After Tiger went back to bed, Betty retrieved her phone from where it had landed under her dresser, the screen miraculously uncracked. She had 17 new messages from Mark. She ignored all of them, except the very last. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to love me again. I'm just asking you to let me be Tiger's father. Let me try. Please, that's all I want. Betty's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before typing. He asked about you tonight. He wants to meet you. He thinks you don't want to see him. The response was immediate. When can I meet him? I don't know. I need time. Don't push me on this. I won't push. Thank you, Betty. Thank you for considering it. She set her phone down and walked to Tiger's room one more time, watching him sleep peacefully. She was making a mistake. She knew she was making a mistake. But maybe some mistakes were worth making for Tiger's sake. Chapter 9. The Breaking Point. The engagement party invitation arrived at Betty's office 3 days later. Formal, elegant, announcing the union of Mark Perry and Nina Williams. Betty stared at it, confusion spiraling. He'd said the wedding was off, said he'd told Nina everything. She called him immediately. The invitation? I know. Mark sounded exhausted. Nina's father is forcing the party to happen. Says we signed contracts. Says if I don't show up, he'll sue me into oblivion. So show up. What? Go to the party. Marry Nina. I was serious when I said you don't have to destroy your life for us. Betty. I mean it, Mark. Tiger and I will be fine. We've been fine for 5 years. You don't owe us this sacrifice. I'm not doing it because I owe you. His voice was firm. I'm doing it because I want to, because I love you, because I won't repeat the same mistake. Even if it costs you everything, especially then. Betty closed her eyes. You're insane. Probably, but I'm your kind of insane. I was never that dramatic. You burned my letter and sent me a photo of the ashes. That was pretty dramatic. Despite everything, Betty laughed. You deserved it. I did. A pause. Betty, will you watch? Watch what? The engagement party. It's being live-streamed. Will you watch when I walk away from everything? Why would you want me to see that? Because I need you to believe I've changed. Words aren't enough. You need to see me choose you in front of everyone. Betty's breath caught. Mark, please, just watch. Then you'll know I'm serious. She hung up without answering. But when the night arrived, Betty found herself on her couch with her laptop open to the live stream. Tiger was at a sleepover, his first ever. The apartment felt too quiet. The ballroom appeared on screen, all crystal and white roses. 400 guests, a string quartet. Then Mark walked in, and Betty's breath stopped. He looked terrible, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His tuxedo hung loose. Nina appeared beside him, beautiful in white, her smile sad. Mark's father was in a wheelchair, oxygen tube visible, glaring with pure hatred. Betty watched Mark greet guests mechanically, watched him not smile, not laugh. He looked like a man walking to his execution. He really is going to do it, Betty whispered. The toasts began. Nina's father spoke about business and legacy. Mark's brother made jokes that fell flat. Then Mark took the microphone. Betty leaned forward, her heart in her throat. I need to say something. Mark began, his voice shaking. The ballroom quieted. Betty watched Nina's face change, watched her realize. "Nina, you are an incredible woman." Mark turned to her. "You're smart and kind, and you deserve someone who loves you with their whole heart." "Mark," Nina's whisper was picked up. "That person isn't me." He turned to the crowd. "I'm in love with someone else. I have a 4-year-old son I've never held, never read a story to, never heard call me daddy." Betty's hand covered her mouth. "5 years ago, the woman I loved told me she was pregnant." Mark's voice broke. "And I told her I didn't want her swell belly. I threw money at her and walked away like a coward." The crowd was silent. "Betty Davis," Mark looked at the camera. "If you're watching, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Tiger. I'm choosing the family I should have chosen 5 years ago." His father tried to stand, fell back. "You're dead to me," the shout echoed. Mark's mother was crying. Nina's father lunged, but security held him back. "I'm sorry, Nina," Mark continued. "I'm sorry to everyone, but I can't keep living the lie. I love Betty. I love our son, and I'm done being the man who ran." He set down the microphone and walked off. Chaos erupted. Betty watched his brother shove him, watched his father screaming, watched security escort Mark out while Nina stood frozen, the live stream cut to black. Betty sat in stunned silence. He'd actually done it. Lost everything, his family, his company, his reputation, for her, for Tiger. Her phone rang, Mark's number. She answered, her voice barely working. "I watched." "I meant every word." He was breathing hard. "I'm outside your building. Can I come up?" "What?" "I'm here, right now." Betty went to a window, looked down. Mark stood by his car, still in his tuxedo, phone to his ear. "Let me come up," he pleaded. "Please, just to talk." "Tiger's not here." "I know. I just want to talk to you." Betty should have said no. Instead, she buzzed him up. He appeared 3 minutes later, and for the first time in 5 years, Betty let Mark Perry into her home. They stood in her living room, 5 feet between them. "You really did it," she said. "I told you I would. Your father disowned you on camera." "I know. Nina's family will sue you." "I know. You'll lose everything. I already lost everything 5 years ago when I lost you." He stepped closer. "This is just making it official." Betty's eyes filled with tears. "You're an idiot. I'm your idiot. I haven't forgiven you. I know. I might never forgive you. I know that too." She wiped her eyes angrily. "Then what are you doing here?" "Earning it." His voice was soft. "However long it takes. I'll earn your forgiveness. I'll earn Tiger's love. I'll earn the right to be part of your lives. And if you never do, then I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Betty looked at this man who'd destroyed her, who'd just destroyed himself for her. "Tiger wants to meet you," she heard herself say. Mark's face transformed. "Really? He asks about you, all the time. It breaks my heart." "When?" "I don't know. Soon." "But Mark," she stepped closer, "if you hurt him, if you walk away again, I will make sure you regret it." "I won't walk away, I swear." "You swore that before." "I know." He reached for her hand, stopped himself. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm different now. I lost you once. I won't survive losing you twice." Betty stared at him, her walls crumbling. "Leave," she finally said. Mark's face fell. "Betty, not forever. Just tonight. I need to think. I need to process what you just did." "Okay." He backed toward the door. "Okay, I'll wait. However long you need." He was halfway out when Betty called, "Mark?" He turned, hope on his face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing us." His smile was like sunrise. It was always going to be you. Then he was gone, and Betty was alone with an impossible decision. Chapter 10. The Choice. Betty didn't sleep that night at all. She watched the engagement party footage 17 times, studying Mark's face as he walked away from everything. Watched his father's rage, watched the moment Mark looked at the camera and spoke directly to her like she was the only person in the world. By morning, she'd made her decision. She called Mark at sunrise before she could change her mind. "I want you to meet Tiger," she said without preamble, without greeting. "Today, before I change my mind or lose my nerve." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway for him, not for you." They met at the park, neutral territory, public space. Betty held Tiger's hand as they walked toward the playground, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. Mark was already there, sitting on a bench, looking like he hadn't slept either. When he saw them approaching, he stood up slowly, his eyes locked on Tiger like he was seeing a miracle. "Baby," Betty knelt down to Tiger's level, her hands shaking. "Remember how we talked about your daddy?" Tiger nodded seriously, his eyes wide. "He's here. He wants to meet you very much." Tiger looked at Mark with wide, curious eyes. "That's him. That's my daddy. That's him." "He has my eyes," Tiger observed with 4-year-old directness. Mark laughed, the sound choked with emotion, tears already streaming. "You have mine, actually, and my smile, and apparently my entire face." Tiger considered this seriously. Then he walked right up to Mark and stared at him without fear. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Mark blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, I do now." "What's your favorite?" "T-Rex," Mark said immediately, remembering their previous conversation somehow. Tiger's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Mine too. They're the best. Do you know they had really good eyesight? Not like the movies say." And just like that, the ice was broken. Betty watched them talk about dinosaurs, her throat tight with emotion. Watched Mark listen to Tiger's enthusiastic explanations with absolute attention, like nothing else in the world existed. Watched her son, their son, slowly warm to this stranger who was his father. Watched the natural connection forming. After 20 minutes that felt like seconds, Tiger ran off to the swings, his attention span maxed out. Mark turned to Betty, tears streaming down his face openly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you for this. Thank you for letting me meet him. He's perfect." "Don't thank me yet. This doesn't mean we're okay. This doesn't fix anything." "I know. It doesn't mean I forgive you for abandoning us. I know that too. It just means I'm willing to let you try to be his father. Just try. That's all. That's all I'm asking for. That's everything." They watched Tiger play on the swings, this man and woman connected by love and pain, and the beautiful child they'd created together. "What happens now?" Mark asked quietly, carefully. "I don't know. We take it slow. We see if you can actually be the father Tiger needs, the father he deserves." "And us?" Betty looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since he'd walked back into her life. Saw the regret etched into every line of his face, the desperation, the hope, the love she'd once believed in. "There is no us," she said gently but firmly. "There's you trying to be Tiger's father. That's all this is." "I love you," Mark said simply. "I need you to know that, even if you never love me back, even if you hate me forever." "I loved you once," Betty admitted, the words costing her. 5 years ago, I loved you completely. You destroyed that love. You killed it. I know. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive you. Maybe someday we can be friends, co-parents, but that's all I can promise. Nothing more. It's more than I deserve." Tiger ran back, grabbing Mark's hand without hesitation. "Will you push me on the swings? Please." Mark looked at Betty, asking permission without words. She nodded once. "I'd love to," Mark said, his voice breaking completely. Betty watched them walk to the swings together, Mark slowing his pace to match Tiger's little steps. Watched Mark carefully push the swing while Tiger shrieked with laughter, pure joy on his small face. She pulled out her phone. There was a voicemail from Mark, left right after the engagement party. The one she'd saved, but never listened to, afraid of what it might say. Now she pressed play. I did it. I lost everything. My family, my company, my name. I'm standing in the rain again, like the first time I waited for you outside your office. But this time I'm not scared, because I know what I want. I want you. I want Tiger. I want to spend every day earning back what I threw away, even if it takes forever, even if you never let me in. I love you, Betty Davis. I'm sorry I was too much of a coward to say it when it mattered 5 years ago. Betty saved the voicemail again, her finger hovering over delete but not pressing it. Maybe someday she'd delete it. Maybe someday she wouldn't need the reminder of what he'd sacrificed. But not today. Tiger ran back to her, breathless and happy, his face flushed. Mama, did you see how high I went? I saw, baby. She scooped him up, holding him tight, breathing him in. Mark walked over slowly, keeping his distance, respecting her boundaries perfectly. Can I see him again? He asked quietly, hope and fear in his voice. Betty looked at her son's hopeful face, at Mark's desperate eyes. Next Saturday. Same time, same place. Don't be late. Mark's smile could have lit the entire city, pure joy. Thank you. I won't be. I promise. Don't make me regret this. I won't. I swear I won't. They left the park, Betty and Tiger in one car, Mark alone in his, watching them drive away. That night, after putting Tiger to bed, Betty stood at her window looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. Mark. He's perfect. You raised him perfectly. Thank you for today. She typed back. I know I raised him well. I miss so much. 5 years of everything. You did. I'll never forgive myself for that. Betty stared at that message for a long time before responding. Good. You shouldn't. Ever. But then she added, he likes you. That's something. That's a start. It's everything. It's more than I deserve. Betty set her phone down and went to check on Tiger one more time. He was asleep, peaceful, one arm thrown over his stuffed T-Rex. She'd survived 5 years alone, built a life, raised an incredible son without help. Mark had destroyed everything for a chance to be part of that life now. Maybe it would work. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe she'd forgive him someday. Maybe she'd even love him again. But probably not. Trust took time. Love took more. She'd given him this chance because Tiger deserved to know his father. Because despite everything, Mark had proven he could sacrifice for them, could be brave when it mattered. But trust, love, forgiveness, that would take more than grand gestures and public declarations. That would take time, years probably, if it happened at all. Betty pulled Tiger's blanket up to his chin, kissed his forehead gently and whispered, Your daddy loves you, baby. He's trying. We'll see if trying is enough. Then she went to bed, alone, knowing her life had just gotten infinitely more complicated, but watching Tiger's face light up when Mark knew his favorite dinosaur. Maybe complicated was worth it. For now, that was enough.